It's a pleasure having you all. Welcome to Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa, where we discuss pertinent issues of peace and sustainability around the world and across Africa. I'm George Mutalemwa, moderating this session on behalf of the Africa Peace and Development Network, MAMA. Our theme today is a critical discourse analysis of leadership and rulership in Africa. And we've got two eminent speakers here with us today. We've got Dr. Azaveli Lwaitama, who is working with the ActionAid-Tanzania as one of the founders. And he has been also lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam and several other universities in Africa and Europe, and especially is qualified in English, language. And then we've got Professor Eginald Mihanjo, also a professor of history at St. Augustine University of Tanzania. And it's a pleasure having you both. Thank you for your time. I know you are quite busy. And I welcome everybody here on board. Please join me in welcoming our speakers for today, Dr. Azaveli Lwaitama and Professor Eginald Mihanjo. And now the floor is yours, Dr. Lwaitama, to begin, and you'll be followed by Professor Mihanjo. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, George. I must begin by thanking my former secondary school student, now Professor Mihanjo, who linked me to you, and you gave me the honor of inviting me to share my thoughts on issues that might be of relevance to the quest for peace and development in the world, or rather, development and peace, because sometimes if there is no development, then peace is in peril, because people who are seeking for food and they can't get it, or they are denied it, as we see in Gaza, you can see people lose dignity, lose a sense of proportion. They even lose a sense of belonging together. I mean, each one pushes to get their share because they are the risk of starvation. So development is key, but development, if it is brought about by means of governing relations between human beings either in the production space or human beings in the distribution space, then if the relations between them are managed or governed by methods that reduce their sense of self-worth or their sense of self-rule, then my thesis is not necessarily mine. I mean, a lot of people subscribe to it. That yes, development good and usually associated with material trappings, which make life a bit less full of sweat and suffering, and make it more amenable to having more time to yourself to sing and dance, and relax, I mean, that's what development is all about, But if such development is brought about by, in the context where relations between human beings, either in the production space or in the distribution space, are such as to degrade people, to degrade those who are relating to each other, or reduce their sense of self-rule, then one suspects that in history, and I suspect my student and now Professor Mihanjo will agree with me, that history is full of all kinds of wars and lack of peace, precisely because somebody has stepped on somebody's foot. Someone has made someone very angry, someone has made someone unhappy, and provoked them to throwing stones at each other, although sometimes people do throw stones at each other because of feeling that they needed to be the only ones out there in town, I mean, so there are people who just step on other people's feet, not because have had anybody step on their feet, but because they just feel, they want to see themselves as the only, the big person out there, I mean, who can kick you in the gut when they feel so and feel good about it, So my thesis and what I'm proposing that we could engage in a discussion about is we have got these terms, leadership and rulership. There is to rule and there is to lead. And in all languages, and I use most of my examples from Kiswahili, which is a language that is spoken widely in Africa, especially on the East African coast and East African region, but also because a lot of people who were members of the liberation movements lived in Dar es Salaam, therefore they picked up some Kiswahili, so people in Mozambique, in South Africa, in Namibia, they know, Angola, they know a lot of Kiswahili. So I will pick most of my examples from Kiswahili. Because I'm a linguist, what I'm going to use is what is called critical discourse analysis, which is a way of looking at language in use, be it sentences or, words, in a manner which either reinforces existing relations of inequality or equality, or they seek to challenge those existing relations, whether they are of equality or inequality. So critical discourse analysis is an analysis of discourse. And I will share you after the talk some of the definitions that fellow linguists have come up with. That discourse is language in use. Might be a sentence, might be a if you move out of language and go to graphics, might be a sign, might be a graphic of some kind, and so these terms have been used and continue to be used, but they are loaded. They carry with them a lot of luggage, a lot of baggage, cultural, anthropological, and historical. So if you use critical discourse analysis, meaning if you use an analysis of language in use, which seeks to find those linguistic elements that indicate that something is more than what we see. For instance, if you use the word, I want to rule you. I mean, I'm sure if you are telling some people that I want to rule you, and sometimes we do say, we refuse to be ruled. Don't rule over me. I mean, the term rule, I mean, it's not nicely accepted by most people, except when you are saying, I rule myself. I mean, if you rule yourself, that's fine. It means you control your feelings, you control your behavior. So to rule yourself is fine, but to rule others, that means to impose your will on them. That means not necessarily to seek their cooperation, but their obedience. I mean, and most people don't like to obey. I mean, they feel uncomfortable if they are made to obey, unless of course they obey in order to get some benefit. So the terms leadership and rulership, if you look at the situation in Africa, for instance, I'm coming closer to Africa, is that under colonial rule. Now, obviously, before colonial rule, there were other catastrophes that other catastrophes that people in Africa have gone through. Like the slave trade. Where you are captured, you are put in chains, you are you are sent on foot to the shore, and you are put on a ship in chains, in a hole, and then when you arrive in the Americas, you work on plantations, without your will. We went through that period, and then also there was also a period of colonial rule. You remember the famous King Leopold in the Congo. He wanted to get the rubber harvested. And if you want to use to get rubber harvested and extract maximum profit from it, then you have to be harsh with the people who are extracting the rubber. And when you are harsh, then people rebel. And when people rebel, then they begin to think of freedom. Now, but of course, those people went to the plantation. There are some who worked in the farm, in the field, and the others who worked in the house. And that's where a great African American, Malcolm X, coined the term house Negro and field Negro. The field Negro, lives in the field. When the field Negro hears that the master's house is on fire, he prays for the wind so that the house may burn, and kill the master. But the house Negro, fights to put the fire out because he lives in the house. And when Malcolm X says, when the master is sick, the house Negro says, we are sick. So he personalizes now the master to be himself or herself. So these Africans, even those who went in the diaspora, in the Americas, and those who remained on the continent, if they were under King Leopold, they faced the same problems as those that the field Negro faced, and therefore they rebelled. And we see all kinds of rebellions in Haiti and so on and so on. Now, therefore, the idea that you can have people working, and of course, if we go back even in Europe, there was time when, there was slave labor, and then wage labor is a little bit relatively free. You take yourself to the master and you offer yourself, you agree with the terms, then, but they are usually much better, and of course, advanced capitalism, after it used, colonialism to enhance some good things for the worker in Europe, made the worker in Europe a bit better, and feel, not like a wage slave. When people like Karl Marx talk about wage slave, modern industrial work in Europe. I think, apart from, doing some manual work, and when you are using gadgetry, you can feel actually, you can even take some shares in the company, and then feel like you are part of the owners, So the outcome is that methods have been found of reducing the extent to which, in extracting value from those who are working, whether for you or if you're working for yourself, you reduce the extent to which people feel they are working for someone. You reduce the extent to which people feel they are being ruled. You increase the opportunity for people to feel they are ruling themselves. You produce incentives for people to decide when to wake up. You put incentives so that if you wake up earlier, you will be richer. If you work late, you will lose your job, etc., etc. So you increase the opportunity for people to rule themselves rather than be ruled. But the slave in the field plantation, had no choice. You wake up at particular times when they are decided, that it is decided by the master that you wake up. The colonial subject in the Congo under King Leopold and his company, you don't have a lot of choices. There are no incentives. There are no labor incentives there. You just use compassion to make sure that you extract as much from the labor as you can. And of course, I'm using history, but even today, I mean, we do have these examples of these kind of things, you know, happening in our neighborhoods. But now people fought for independence back to Africa because they were thinking of, they were upset about what was happening in the past. Those situations were in the production place, in the redistribution place. There was more compassion. There was more commandism. There was more constraint on self-rule. There was rule over you rather than rule by yourself. So you might have got a good job. You might have, you know, got some progress. You might have got a road. You might have, you know, have some improvement in the circumstances under which human beings live. I mean, a house made of concrete and iron sheets, you know, much better than a thatched house. But how did you get that improvement in your material circumstances? Was it by compassion? Was it by self-rule? Or was it by rule by someone else over you? So people fought for independence because they were thinking of those situations of being ruled rather than ruling themselves. And when we say ruling themselves, the situations, there were various forms of self-rule, you know, before colonialism and before the slave trade, but they were, you know, there were arrangements that were acceded to, agreed to by those who participated in them. They felt it was self-rule, you know. But now, you know, with colonialism, you know, definitely, you know, if you were under King Leopold, there was no self-rule there. I mean, you were ruled. Now, after independence, what happens? You know, I mean, you know, one would have thought, you know, you came together, you know, imbued with a Pan-Africanist spirit of wanting to do away with arbitrary colonial rule. Now, would you want to replace arbitrary colonial rule with arbitrary African rule by someone else? You know, that tradition of fighting against colonial rule, I think, encouraged a lot of sentiments around the idea that we want leaders. We want leaders. And so in Kiswahili, for instance, you have uongozi, leadership, as opposed to utawala, rulership. But unfortunately, in many of our African countries, you hear politicians, the elite, calling themselves, we are members of the ruling party. And I keep asking myself, being a critical discourse analyst, the ruling party? Are you King Leopold? How can you be a ruling party? I mean, I thought you should see a leadership party, a party in leadership position. I mean, why would you want to now make the idea of utawala, rulership, acceptable? It means you are playing games on people's minds. You want them to accept the idea of rulership. And of course, the World Bank came in and talked about good governance. Good governance. Now, of course, good governance a little bit, you know, nuanced. You know, govern. You know, to govern is the same thing as to rule? Not exactly. But in Kiswahili now, you know, when you know this elite in Tanzania translate good governance from the World Bank, you know, what do they say? They say utawala bora. You know. Which is a misnomer, you know. How can there be good rulership over you? How can rulership over you be good? So it's a contradiction in terms. But you see some political parties who have some enlightenment, whose leaders are enlightened, coining the term uongozi bora, you know, good leadership. So the party, for instance, that Julius Nyerere led in Tanzania for years before he died, I used the term uongozi bora, you know, good leadership. Not, you know, translated good governance, not as, you know, not utawala bora, which is what is now being used, because the current leadership in Tanzania use the term utawala bora. They have a ministry called utawala bora, which to me as a critical discourse analyst makes me wondering what, and this is of a party which derives this legitimacy, its political legitimacy, from the literature and the language of the ruling party, which is called the Chama cha Mapinduzi Revolutionary Party, which is supposed to be encouraging good leadership, uongozi bora, not translating the World Bank's good governance to good leadership. So I therefore now go further and say there are even examples out there. I'm now talking about Africa and its history and the terms and the associations of to rule and to lead. To lead, is when you collect around yourself like-minded people. You have chosen the same route. You are going the same direction. And one of them takes the first step and the others are following, but they are all following because they want to go where you are going, where all of you are going. But, if someone among you now thinks that they know better where you should go, then rule comes in, then, you have to arrange mechanisms of containing some recalcitrant, truant boys, want to second guess where the leader wants to take you. The leader knows everything, you are supposed to follow, but I am asking myself, if you have that kind of leadership, if you have that leadership that becomes rulership, will there be peace? Will there be development? Will development be sustainable? Will it be self-propelled? Will people be working for what they want to work to achieve, or will they be working for someone else? Other like the Malcolm X's plantation field Negro, who has to work hard, otherwise they will be starved to death, otherwise they will be caned or something. Now, having sketched out in very broad outline those two approaches to relations between people who are either in production or in distribution, who are working together towards continuing to live on earth in happiness, in peace with each other. And I'm suggesting that where you have introduced the methods of relating to each other that are tilting towards rulership as opposed to leadership, then the possibility, first of all, even of viewing development as, freedom, individual freedom, development as increasing the possibilities for yourself and others around you of living a better life and propelling yourself, pushing yourself, ruling over yourself, waking up early because that is what you want to do as your contribution to the progress of your society, rather than waking up early because we have been compelled to do so. And I'm saying that at continental level has had some problems, and continue to have some problems. And I suspect, as a linguist and as a philosopher, student of philosophy, I suspect we need to encourage our leaders and our people, ordinary people, to continue questioning these leadership styles. Are they those of leadership or rulership? Are they those of seeking to convince people and believing that those people you are leading also want to go the same way that you are going, and you are just, leading them where they want to go, not, telling them what to do, because you are the one who knows where they ought to go. Now, I will conclude that sketch with in the development field where I'm now working, for an organization called ActionAid. They work with the most vulnerable people, women, children, people who are very poor in terms of income. And they seek to not necessarily, this organization, I'm talking about ActionAid, not necessarily to give them something, not to go to a poor family and give them some cash transfer, not to go to a school and build a school, and not go to a school and, although they sometimes do, not go to a school and build a pit rattle, but rather encourage discussion among those people who need a rattle, see whether they may actually adopt the idea that what can we do ourselves to be able to get a rattle? What can we do ourselves in order to get a better school? What can we do ourselves to get a better income and so on from our labor? So this organization seeks to empower those who are vulnerable to demand from rights holders, those who are duty holders. Those people, governments take tax in order to offer service, right? But they sometimes take tax and they don't offer any service. So the organization encourages people through, discussion, debate, and field work where people are lead themselves, govern themselves. You encourage them, you work with them as partners. So this organization seeks to encourage that kind of approach to development, because development is, as I said at the beginning, without development, even freedom can be lost. But people who are starving, may just be prepared to forgo their freedom, in order to continue living. So this organization, even it is an international organization, but even at national level, they've adopted what is called a governance model, whereby decisions are made by structures of representatives. All decisions are made by representatives at various levels of representatives. And then there is rotation in the leadership. You don't become a chair forever. I was a founder member. I rotate after 6 years. I rotated off. So after another 5-6 years, people may bring you back, if there is need. But the structure itself says you have to rotate off. You can't be a representative for more than 6 years continuously. And although the decision-making bodies are all representative, they are not the management. There is management. Management is recruited by those in governance. Policies are passed by those in governance. But those in governance, the representatives, are not allowed to get involved in the management. Management is the prerogative of those in management who are recruited on basis of merit. So you separate, the two. Those who make decisions, I suppose you can say, this is ideally this is the model of having people in parliament and people in government. This is the idea of the three-tier, concept of the state. You have parliament. You even separate those who are doing interpreting what is passed by parliament, and then you have a government, which is not allowed to make decisions around policy. Now, but of course, in Africa, because you have rulers rather than leaders, you find someone is a minister, is also a member of parliament. So this person, brings a bill to parliament and then debates it and votes on it. How can you bring a bill to parliament and then you vote on it? And then, of course, if the election system is such that it is controlled by the state, it means those people in the state, meaning management,
They are the ones who eventually do not only prepare the papers and the this expert advice and so on, but they're actually the ones who then turn over to parliament, make the decision themselves. Now, in the action aid model, if you are management, you can't pass policy. You, of course, you are the one who prepares policy papers. Of course, but the policies are passed by someone who is not involved in management. And therefore, it is then possible for the leader to be a leader and for management not to be the one which makes the policies that they are implementing, and by separating these two, you have a model that I would have thought I would recommend, and of course it has some parallels with the ideal concept of like in the US, I think, where you have, if you are a parliamentarian, if you are a member of Senate or Congress, you can't be a cabinet minister. you can't be bringing, because when you are cabinet minister, we bring you to the Congress and Senate to grill you, to ask you questions, to demand accountability. But in the Tanzanian model, even in the British model, you are the prime minister, but you are elected a member of Sheffield. Then you become a prime minister. Now I'm not sure. And then your cabinet, So all I'm saying is that this model I would recommend as an example that maybe as intellectuals in Africa and those who are sympathetic to the cause of Africans who have gone through too many Maafa catastrophes, of being ruled, ruled as slaves, ruled as wage laborers, ruled as colonial subjects under King Leopold. Surely they need a break from rulership. They need leadership, which can only be found by separating and investing the role of making decisions representatives who are truly representatives, not like in many systems in Africa where representatives are not representatives actually. It's government officials who rig the election and then they pretend that they have got the mandate to govern. To govern when they are the ones who have created the conditions for themselves being elected. And then they find themselves both in the cabinet and in parliament. They bring policy to be adopted by the representatives, and then they vote on it because they are also representatives. I rest my case.
Thank you so much indeed, Dr. Lwaitama, for this wonderful presentation. And there will be questions, of course, and comments afterwards. But for now, I'd like to ask Peter to start screen sharing. And I would like to invite Professor Mihanjo to begin his talk. Thank you all for your time and your consideration. I would like to, invite Professor to proceed. Welcome, Professor Mihanjo.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you, Dr. Karema. And I thank also those who are attending this lecture. I am Eginald Mihanjo, working in SAUT and also in the State University of Zanzibar as a chair, professor chair of the late Abeid Amani Karume, the first president of Zanzibar. So I hope you will follow the slides which I have also provided they are about just around 80 slides. And I thank Dr. Lwaitama, my teacher. He is my mentor. He groomed me from 3 up to university. So most of my ideas are a product of Dr. Lwaitama, and that is why I did not start in this lecture, so that my senior father should raise most of the important issues. As far as the lectures is concerned,
I propose yes. Great.
yeah. As far as the lecture is concerned, I believe this is a very important theme today globally, and as Lwaitama has put it, particularly in Africa. I'm more interested in that, specifically when I think on the future of Africa, and that is the area where I will use my practical, not just theoretical, but I am more practically and academically experienced on the issue of leadership and on the issues of rulership. I have been not only a lecturer from 1985, but also a party political cadre and advisor to Lwaitama has said to the ruling party in Tanzania, but also I have been director of studies in diplomatic defense as well as security, and I have normally been given more practical engagement, including with the liberation parties, the ANC, SWAPO, ZANU-PF, FRELIMO, CCM, and other from Ghana and Ethiopia, plus the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the issues, as my teacher has said, issues of leadership versus rulership is about issues of freedom, about issues of democracy. And these issues, if we remember correctly, are historically very complex. Today, young guys don't seem to remember that the issues being discussed today were discussed in ancient Greek, some centuries, 5 centuries back, before Christ. It was BC. And the issue of democracy was discussed then because of the similar problem that we are having today. It was a fight between the common people and against the aristocracy, ruled by the best. And if you can trace the Athenian kind of discussion, you have Pericles supporting the rule of people. Aristotle was against that. And Pericles defended that. And it was after the Peloponnesian War of the 5th century BC. From this war, then you get more questions from there. And he talks of democratic constitution as an important, a good political tool for community citizens to live more happily. Life becomes more easy and free. Next. But you have the opposite of those who are thinking around that was Plato and Aristotle, who were basically against democracy. Why? Because they saw it will lead to selfish and corrupt forms of government. Actually, Aristotle talked of democracy as one of the three evils. One of evil in government. The other two were autocracy and tyranny, which he called together as mobocracy, rule of the mob. And this discussion goes on up to now, which my teacher Lwaitama has tried to explain. Remember, in Machiavelli also talked about that, and we keep appreciating Abraham Lincoln, that the government of the people, by the people, for the people. So it is. It is clearly a subject which is very, very important. It is about democratic institutions and leadership that is supposed to serve for the common good. It is supposed to lead individuals, citizens, to choose a good community and serve a good community and nations. And that is exactly is the problem today, which Dr. Lwaitama has pointed out. And I pointed at the dilemma today, and it leads to the problem on the equation of leadership and rulership. How do we address these bigger equations? And for me, from my historical experience, as Lwaitama was saying, not only globally and Africa, but Tanzania, all of those nations are sliding back to rulership. And you hardly notice practically the separation of power, checks and the balances. What you get is a social atomist kind of rulership, and that is a very serious for the citizens. And Mwalimu, as Dr. Lwaitama said, Mwalimu called it ulevi wa madaraka. Those who have drunk from their positions. And he says these guys are practicing umalaya. It is like prostitutes who gets money from whatever owner. It is more on statist accumulation. And if you stay longer in power, you accumulate more through corruption, through your position. And I hope peace in Tanzania is not sliding into anarchy and the chaos. That is what I see in future. Not very soon, but not too late. It is like China's experience on Tiananmen Square massacre. The resistance from April to June 1989, where freedom is not expanding, people normally fight for it. And I was in China 2000, discussion with the Communist Party, and we asked them the problem which they faced, and they told us that was the main condition for change to socialism in Chinese characteristics, so that they can focus on the grassroots people needs, on the citizens kind of freedom. Next slide. As Dr. Lwaitama has put it correctly, rulership is not leadership. And historically, the question of rulership in post-colonial state is an extension of colonial logic, colonial state logic. The protection of the political elite permanent government positions, some form of absolutism, authoritarianism. Leadership is not about violence, is not about war. Just like now, staying in party or government leadership is almost becoming a family matter, a clan matter, clan interest, and so it is becoming a national threat to security. And most of us, sometimes we in history, we say colonialism has 3 phases. A conquest phase or establishment phase, which goes up to mid-19th century up to 1910s. That is most of us in history teach more about those wars of conquest. But the worst part is the second part, the putting of institutions, colonial institutions, religious, education, health, and all that between 1920s and the 1940s. But the last part, which is very terrible, is the colonial dominant phase, which starts from 1950s up to now. Really, up to now. You get independence, but you become more colonized. And it is a situation which leads to recolonization. So these structures reflect that situation. And the threats are more real now. And you have seen like the situation in the global world, like now in USA, Israel, Ukraine, all that reflect rulership. And it is based on war industry machinery and is not about peace. Peace is not brought by military. Peacekeepers is a war industry, a war-making machine. It requires, peace requires the grassroots people themselves to create it, to fight against the rulership. Next slide, please. So, in the case of Africa, the threats are real. The grassroots people are now quite aware. The question now, as Dr. Lwaitama was saying, the question now whether they have leadership or they have rulership. In Tanzania, Mwalimu tried to resolve these problems by documents which were called Mwongozo wa Tano, 1971 and 1981. But the issue of leadership collapsed with the Bretton Woods institution ideas of good governance, good governance 1980s, 1990s, and this consolidated the confusion which we are going in now. As I said, the situation now is real of recolonization, which reflect colonial phase domination phase to the present. So you find the party system, ruling party system is almost very questionable now by the grassroots, and mainly the ruling elite become partners to the foreign capital. And I say this is a good condition for building up of mobilization, grassroots mobilization for the second liberation, that of economic revolution, which will deal against the ruling class, agents of corruption, the monocracy and the agents of partners with the foreign powers. Next. So my conclusion is that we can discuss it together at length, whether we want to discuss on Tanzania or on Africa in the current and the future landscape. Let us look on the future, which will be more useful just by using the practical experience of the past and the present. And this I discussed in 2005 when I have training for district security officers, all district security officers of Tanzania in Arusha on the 2nd March 2005, when I tried to link democracy and fighting terrorism. I was also called from this to Namibia to discuss the same kind of issue. The issue, which is very clear, is the social atomist view. The liberal democracy expands in insecurity, expands violence, war, and rulership, and it is not for the benefit of people. So I thank you, and I thank Dr. Lwaitama. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Mihanjo, for this wonderful insight that you have shared with us. And now I would like to ask members on this call for questions and comments. You may address your question to any of the speakers, but of course you can also share your own experience, because leadership and rulership is, well, you can find these in any country, I suppose. So whoever would like to begin, please. The floor is open.
We'll start if you have no one else.
Yes, please, go ahead, Janet.
Well, first of all, you remind me of my husband who was widowed. So the leadership in the family sort of collapsed in a way. And he would say he's vacuuming because democracy needs constant cleaning. He has to make the house safe for democracy by cleaning, laundering, vacuuming, etc. And so it's on the most mundane level, what you're saying applies always. And the good well, let's see, you used all these, between the two of you, I think, let me say, as a peace educator, that you are both making an excellent case for education and peace education, because if you're going to separate bureaucracy and management from leadership, and you're going to have a critical population to criticize, to critique, to discuss, like you said, I would love to be in this conversation of, lifelong challenge that you are mentioning. But you need to educate. You need to expand the educated class. And for example, in the United States class, I think the whole public needs education. We adults need education. And that's why we're here today with you at this seminar. Okay, my question is, what are your insights for strengthening the citizenship and citizen participation? You were both so articulate and clear, and of course, what you're saying applies definitely to what's happening in the United States. We don't have, what would you say, like I'm thinking of dams, like that hold back water. Well, how do we hold back this corporate accumulative global colonization, as you said? They were both your talks so brilliant. Thank you. I hope my questions are all right with you. Okay, thank you.
I don't know whether you'd like to respond to that, Dr. Lwaitama or Professor Mihanjo.
I see there is a hand somewhere.
Okay, then let's take this hand from Richard, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Please, is my voice clear today? Okay. I'm so glad to more often to have treatment from people with experiences. In fact, I got two meanings from the presentation from each of them. The meaning to the text itself, and then the meaning to the voices that brought is not a piece, builder. I think it is going well with me. But at times I think at times I get confused that our current leaders should have had a series of teachings of such, so that we could have helped them in their late. But you realize that you see someone from nowhere and the person becomes a minister. You see someone from nowhere, then becomes government appointee. So I think generation is coming should have such opportunities. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard, for that comment. Please feel free to respond to those two.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you, Richard. And of course, thank you, Eginald, Professor Mihanjo. I mean, I think you you situated my discussion more concretely into the Tanzanian political milieu, because you are, more close to it than I am. I mean, I look at it as an academic, while you have been an academic, but also someone inside the establishment, but critical of the establishment, which gives you insights that I may not have except when I listen to you. Now, Janet, when you have a system, we have a structure. I gave the example of ActionAid. I mean, it's a development NGO. I mean, it's small little example, But, if you don't create structures which proceed from having respect for those who you wish to claim to represent, because governments are supposed to be there claiming to represent the people that they claim to represent, Governments are there claiming to want to bring development. But when governments annex to themselves the decision as to what development should mean, I mean, you find a leader, thinking that they know what the people they are leading want. They know what they want. The leaders think they know what they want, Now, I mean, look at the United States, for instance. I mean, right now, with this Israeli, risky exchange, between Israel and then, I was listening to the Al Jazeera, and I was scared to hear that the president is making foreign policy decisions on the roof. I mean, there is an institution called the intelligence community. They had a document which was saying, Iran has no nuclear capability, not now yet, at least, And then the president was saying, don't have to listen to. I mean, that's the kind of situation we have in Africa. Once a person is elected president, they know everything. They don't have to listen. Actually, the Tanzanian constitution actually says that the president is not obliged to take any advice, and they don't have to explain why they didn't have to take it. Now, in the constitution that we are fighting to get, which in Tanzania we call the Warioba constitutional proposal, the idea is that if the president refuses to take advice, they have to explain why they have refused to take advice. Because, the presidency is an institution. You are a representative. You can't just, it's not about you. It's not about your feelings or your sentiments. It's about what the structure tells you you ought to accept, even if you personally, you don't like it. Now, when now you have doing what Trump is doing is actually encouraging in Africa a situation where the leader knows everything. If the leader can give you a road, if the leader can give you a hospital, if the leader can give you a school building, then you are supposed to clap. You are not supposed to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not the hospital we wanted this time. We wanted a school. It's not the school that we wanted this time. We wanted more books for students. It's not more books for students. We wanted more leisure time for students. If you have a citizenry, you're quite right, Janet. If you have a citizenry, which questions all the time. When Africa was fighting for independence, because there was no ruler, the head of the party was compelled to have to talk to the people and extract support from them. But when they are president, they can dictate to them. And they can shout them down, actually. Say, hey, I built you a road yesterday, I brought you a school yesterday. Now, if citizens are not empowered to question, to say, no. It's not, even King Leopold of the Congo built some roads. Even the field Negro on the plantation, when they came on the slave ship, they were not wearing clothes, now they were given some clothes, So if you give me clothes, it doesn't mean that I'm now like a donkey, or I'm like a cow, or like a lapdog. You can build something for me, and then I lose my freedom, So you are quite right, and that's why I was giving you the example of a small organization. Globally, it's nothing. ActionAid, what is ActionAid? But they've even put forward, even for management, they've put forward what are called 10 feminist leadership principles, which says you must be self-aware, you must exercise self-care and caring for others. You must dismantle bias. You should not, tell someone that, I know what you need. You should not go out on the street and see people who are not wearing clothes like you and say, I think they need clothes because I am wearing clothes and I feel good wearing them, so they also need them. That's, be inclusive, share power, deliberately share power, be responsible and transparent in the use of power, be accountable, collaborative, be respectful. Be respectful for feedback. If people tell you, but we didn't follow what you are saying, if I, like a university professor, I didn't follow what you are saying, professor, and say, yeah, you must be stupid, because you don't want feedback, because people have different ways of understanding what you have said. You might have been wrong also, and be courageous in your convictions. Have zero tolerance for all kinds of biases, be it, misogyny or racism or, sexual orientation, etc. All kinds of, intolerance in the world that, you can't have peace if you don't have tolerance. You can't have peace if you are not respectful of others. You can't have peace if you think you know what everybody knows, what everybody needs. You can't have a president, for God's sake, who can decide, who can say, we are now in control of Iranian space. We even know where the Ayatollah is. How can a president say that? I mean, to me, I mean, it's crazy, you know. What example is the United States giving to African dictators? I mean, when they look at, you know, Trump can decide everything. And then they will give the United States as an example. They will say a leader must be a leader. Must, meaning must decide, must determine, must not wait for consultation, must not listen to advice, you know, I mean, because he has been elected. When you look at, you know, I think Mihanjo alluded to it. When you look at all these systems of generating leaders through the liberal democratic structures, you wonder, you know, how come much of Western Europe now, you know, I mean, right-wing, you know, groups are the ones who are becoming more popular. How come, you know, someone like Trump is elected leader? You know, you ask yourself, you know, I mean, we need to continue thinking. But I agree with you, Janet. You know, we need education, but we need to accept that we all need education.
Yes. Yes, let's not think of education as just school or something for children, because we haven't solved this. We're challenged with this democracy problem. Please, I'm speaking again, intruding myself, in order to ask you to please make available this wonderful list of 10 feminist principles that we could use. Maybe, George, you couldn't send it to us. My chat isn't working, so if you send it that way, I won't get it. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for a beautiful answer. I mute myself.
Yeah, thank you so much indeed. Now we'll take 3 questions or comments, one from Gail and Dasu and then Mank. And so please, Gail, you're welcome.
Thanks so much. I really appreciated your analysis. And yes, we're all concerned about the problem of leaders getting into power and staying there to enrich themselves, hand things off to their family, who's in charge of everything. I mean, clearly in the US, we're experiencing this, and I know that it's been a problem in the US before for a long time, but it's gotten worse, and in Africa. So my question is, it seems to me like recently the leaders who are like this can get into power through democratic elections, partly by it, even though you've said the elites are enriching themselves, but the elites who then enter an election with all their money from other elites do a lot of advertising, a lot of propaganda, and they seem to prey on people, even people who are impoverished and will be more impoverished if they elect these folks, still vote for them because the folks who are running have paid advertising agencies and figured out you're the one who cares about inflation more than anything else. We're going to promise you the one thing you really want. We're going to control inflation, even if we're not really going to do it. We tell everybody. I mean, you feel like politicians have been doing this forever, promising things they never deliver, and people still fall for it, or maybe there's just no alternative, and so they think they have to fall for it. But on top of it, at least in Kenya, I know that misinformation has been traveling by social media. AI has been involved in making elections harder in Kenya. So on top of it, there's people who are trying to stay informed but don't realize that the sources aimed at them are faulty and are therefore making an election decision based on faulty information. Is this also happening in Tanzania or not? Because, I mean, it's happening in Brazil, it's happening in the US, it happened in our election too. And so is this an added problem when you want to have a robust democracy, but some people aren't informed enough, they believe lies, and other people are being targeted by AI, by propaganda, and they get confused and they believe it. And of course, you could say we need more literacy. We need the citizens to know even more about how to sort through all of this, but that becomes harder and harder. So I wondered if that's also a problem in Tanzania.
Thank you so much, Gail. Let's go to Dasu.
Okay, George, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Lwaitama and Professor Mihanjo for their very brief but excellent presentation. So as usual, it starts with my observation, a very minor observation about leadership in Africa. I would argue what we are seeing now in some parts of Africa, actually many parts, not some, many parts of Africa, it's not an effective leadership, I can say. I don't want to use the word rulership, but I think, personally, I'm talking about effective or ineffective leadership. But what is surprising most, especially on us, some of us who are scholars and intellectuals, we find it quite outlandish to see some African leaders have built an empire of sycophants and people who are only praising them. And whoever dares to challenge them is in trouble. I personally don't understand this kind of situation. And I can also understand why Professor Mihanjo said we are sliding back to rulership. So the first question should go to both presenters. I would ask them, how can African intellectuals and academics be involved in changing the status quo of the African leadership? I'm saying that because we have seen, even here in Tanzania, the intellectuals and the academics are distant themselves from politics. They're actually, I call them straightforward academics. They're only dealing with the academics. That has nothing to do. And you find sometimes things are going astray and they don't say anything. And we expect the grassroots, the ordinary people, who are most of them not even well educated, to comment. I think that's also contributing to this scenario of bad leadership, and the leaders at the top, they do whatever they want. So I want to hear a comment from Professor Mihanjo and Dr. Lwaitama. How can we change this situation so that the intellectuals, African intellectuals, become actively involved?
Thank you so much.
Secondly, let me finish the second one about education. I had Johnny talking about education not only in schools, but let me go straight to the schools. We are also witnessing, I don't believe with the kind of education we are getting in most parts of Africa is really good as compared to the 1970s or 1980s. I'm saying that because based on different researches, actually there's been a lot of criticism, and we are being told by some of the very credible people, scholars, that in most cases, the African universities, they are now producing ignoramuses and illiterates, not all of them, some. So I think this is also one of the variables that's contributing to people who cannot question things. So I would ask the professor and the Dr. Lwaitama also to give us the way forward. How can we get rid of this social conundrum? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dasu. Let's go to Mank. You're welcome, sir. Go ahead, please. Mank. It seems he has issues with... Yes?
Looks like he's...
Can you speak louder, please, Mank?
Muted, I think.
He just unmuted himself, but we can't hear the voice coming through. So as he's figuring that out, if we can have responses to the two from the two speakers who asked questions.
You can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank
you. Go
you.
ahead, please.
So, the question I wanted to raise is, all right, thank you very much. It's a bit different, and you know, I find a lot of our discourse when it comes to discussing leadership to focus on political authority, you know, economic control or traditional power, and it's usually framed in a post-colonial or liberation era. And when we do this, the conversation seems to be going round in circles to some extent, partly because we don't see the change on the ground. We don't see an effect. So I was just wondering about looking at leadership from a different perspective. For example, technological leadership, innovation as a form of leadership, and even innovation as an act, as a political act. Because if we do that, we redefine the discussion from the ground up. And it seems to be missing. And it's an observation I'm making, just like the previous person who asked the question, I forget his name. He made an observation. It's an observation I'm making because it seems prevalent in most of our discussions. So agency is often taken away from people on the ground. And then you find also that our focus is on the top level. Expect change to come from the top. And we all know there's a disincentive. There's a disincentive to making change from the top. Oftentimes we find this in Kenya, in East African countries. Why would the elite or the top 1% want to make a change when they are the beneficiaries of the type of leadership that we have now? What we don't explore is leadership through innovation, systems thinking, and tech-enabled transformation, which is maybe the observation I'd like to make, and also maybe discuss one day to see if this is something worth exploring from an African perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's turn to Peter, then the speakers will respond. Peter, please.
Thank you very much. Menk has brought up an issue about which I have spent decades. What goes unnoticed is that as I put in the chat, the oldest profession, politics, is not changed. But the technology has changed the terrain such that information has lost its value because people respond to spectacle so fast and so forcefully. By the time the facts arrive on the scene, it's all over. And we have to deal with a new reality. And during the Bush administration, one of the cabinet discussed this, talking to journalists, saying, we create new realities and you can take notes. And that goes unnoticed because you can't notice it when 2 or 3 billion people are connected in real time. And a president can muse about maybe we'll just nuke North Korea, and several billion people are immediately affected in their nervous system. They're sent into autonomic panic. They become abnormal. They're not their regular self. They can't make rational decisions. They can barely think. This is a power, and as you say, Monk, this is a technological innovation as a political act, and it fell into the hands of the powerful now today, because when the news media went online, advertising no longer supported them, and they almost went bankrupt. And then they discovered that they could use the data that is necessary to keep the continuity of conversation online. If you Google something, they don't know where to send the answer unless there's an exchange of little files. And those little files are searchable. And if you have several billion of them a minute, you have a lot of information. You can diagnose Parkinson's syndrome by the way the person uses their mouse and keyboard. So we're not aware of this. We can't see this. But now we have this system that could give us total community globally. It could give us instant referendum. It wouldn't have to go to a voting booth. It could handle everything. But the problem is, it belongs to people who have set it up to make profit, to the exclusion of all else. So a machine that operates to that purpose is counter to the purpose of human survival. That's a mouthful. I will stop. Thank you, Monk. That was a very, very important point.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter, also for raising this also very important point. And now our speakers, please, Professor Mihanjo and Dr. Lwaitama, you could please respond.
I can go first maybe because mine are very short and sharp. Number one, yes, I think you're quite right, Mark and Peter, you know. I think, Mark, you call it technologically enabled discourse. And with the technology, you know, lying can be made, you know, less obvious, you know, you know, but also as you, Peter, are saying, I mean, I suspect when Trump tweeted that American, you know, bombs don't fail, when he was saying, you know, we know even where Ayatollah is. I mean, he meant to disable the Iranians. I mean, he believes that they will be disabled. He believes that they will surrender. You know, but the trouble is, you know, the framing comes from that false belief in the invincibility of technology. But obviously, those of us who have lived with the poor and marginalized, we know that it's not that simple, you know. But all the same, you're quite right, Peter and Mark. We need those of us who wish to be on the side of humanity that is seeking to survive these people who, I think Einstein said, you know, all the problems of the world can be attributed to two factors: foolishness and greed. Once you combine foolishness, you know, I mean, when you listen to Trump, you can see this guy thinks things, you know, they are that way when they are not, you know. But when you combine greed with that foolishness, it is devastating. So we need those of us on this other side of the fight. We need also to enable our people, and that takes me to the issues that Gail and of course also Stephen, you raised the same. You know, we need to empower our people in terms of critical thinking. We need, you know, and that's why in linguistics, you know, there is a lot of work now on critical language analysis, critical language awareness. You know, how to ambiguate many of these ambiguous renderings, framings of things. I mean, you find in a newspaper person says, you know, the police were forced to kill 2 rioters. Why would you want to say we are forced? You know, why would you? I mean, because the police spokesperson framed the matter as if they were forced, when they actually went out deliberately to kill those they are calling rioters, so that to make the rest of the other people wanted to campaign against a particular you know, position to be silenced. You know, I mean, my sister here again was asking whether in Tanzania you also have misinformation, disinformation. Of course you do, you know, and people fall for it, unfortunately, because we have not empowered our people to see that language, you know, as you know, philosopher said, any discourse has 3 elements. There is
the thing which is done by speaking, and then the thing which is done by as a result of the speaking, and the take up. I mean, for instance, if I say good morning, I'm saluting you. I'm not asking you about the morning. I'm not inquiring about whether the morning is gloomy or not. I mean, if I tell you how do you do, it's not a question. I could have said I salute you, but what is to salute someone? Is to say I'm here. Can we communicate? And so on and so on. So in a way, we are all quite right. Number one, we need to increase the extent to which we empower our people to be able to see through the lies that are presented every day and so fast with the technology. And we also need to enable our people to be able to also know how to manipulate the technology. And I see, for instance, in Tanzania, there is a campaign right now on there is one group is saying go and vote. The other group is saying we should not go and vote when we know that there is going to be rigging. If we know there is going to be rigging, why should we go and vote? But the government is investing a lot of money and say, when you go to a vote, just pick. When you go to a vote, just pick. And anybody, if you have seen with the shirt saying no reforms, no election. The population, the other day now, the president posted something, and then within a minute, everybody going there, on the president's account, saying no reform, no election, no reform, no election, until they shut it down. So, which means the population, the vulnerable, are also learning how to use the technology, and that is also the where peace activists like ourselves need also to encourage our people also to learn how to see through the lies, but also how to make a counterattack using the same technology.
I think I leave the other points to Mihanjo, who knows Tanzania best than I do.
Thank you so much. Professor Mihanjo, please.
Thank you. I will answer generally, and I promise I will write it down and share in the group. Most of these questions need more time, but let me say only 2 or 3 things. Concerning the issues Janet and Dasu raised, I'm already working on it now because I believe the party framework, the party model is outdated completely. We need to think what is the next model beyond the party framework. Party democracy, I don't think now it is working. In the future, we have to think on a better model. It is not a democratic model now. So we need to work that. And second, decision making is supposed to come at a meeting. Whether your meeting is digital, whether it is physical, or whatever, we call it vikao. But nowadays, vikao, there are more maneuvers in vikao. Vikao have no authority now. So we need to work again on a better model on how decisions are made and they are not maneuvered. if we don't work on that, whether you use technology, whether physical, it will always be manipulated. So we have also to think about that. And the technological part you are saying, you say, we in security and the strategic studies, we say they are national instruments of power. Normally, we talk of four: diplomacy, information, military, and economic. Dying. Now, check the most important today in today's world is that information, which you get information, misinformation, disinformation, media, propaganda, and all that. So this is the area which needs more focus. If you want to counter whatever maneuver, it is the instrument of power which is information. That is where most of the rulers disturb whatever democracy or whatever leadership. This is the area of soft power. It is not using guns. No, it is how you penetrate in the brains and the minds of the people. So that is the most important area. And that answers the question of Dasu. Why the academic fellows, we don't work rightly. I want to remind him, academic freedoms in Tanzania and most of African countries collapsed in 1990s. Just ask Dr. Lwaitama, academic freedom in Dar es Salaam. Why academics are not very honest now? When the Bretton Woods institution intervened, that is the period when academic freedoms, intellectualism collapsed. And that continues up to now. And a professor in economics who is an advisor to the government now, we talked last year, and he admitted to me we are not correctly advising the government, but why? It is because I need money, I need that, I need that. So there's no patriotism in that aspect. And I tell you, me, myself, if I had wanted to become a permanent secretary or a minister or a regional commissioner, I would have gone a long time ago. Asking the party secretary generals how many positions I have refused. It is better to be freedom in poverty with gratitude, rather than to be rich but very unfree. So it is a serious dilemma, and that needs a new kind of structures, models, etc., etc., etc. And that is what I'm doing in the professorial chair of Karume. I'm thinking of designing a new model for liberation and economic empowerment of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Mihanjo. Thank you so much, Dr. Lwaitama. And I thank everybody on this call. And sorry for taking much longer, but I think the points were really worthwhile. So thank you very much indeed. All the best. See you next week if you can make it. Bye-bye.